with that being said, I mean, who do you think's next, to sort of jump ship and where these dominoes fall?
I think I see that. So you touched on it just very briefly earlier. I think Clemson and Florida State. Does the ACC still stand on their own? I don't think so. I think they eventually gravitate, if we think this is going where we think it's going to go, to the SEC, right? I think you're gonna get those. And I think Clemson has a lot of clout. They've been very relevant the last 10 years. Them, Florida State, trying to think who else kind of out of that conference. But I mean, those have been kind of the two prominent big names. Florida State's supposed to be really good this year. That's my big one. I can't really think, I did touch, I guess I said on the Pac-12, Oregon, a lot of clout, basketball. Washington brings a lot of clout, especially in basketball. They're halfway relevant, especially like volleyball over there is huge. So, they also look into those, sports too, not just football. So like, I could see those ones being the more big names, kind of, what are they going to do? You see some of these schools that are moving into some of those conferences potentially. It's like, holy shit, like they're obviously looking to jump at some point here. And I think eventually, like I said, overall, it's kind of become this like 32 versus 32 thing, East versus fucking West, and call it good.
Yeah. And I think for me, I think it's Washington and Oregon. I think they're a package deal. They recognize their brand. They know how good they are. I'm up in the air about this. I don't know. I could really go either way on it. I think there's a lot of cases to be made. There's a lot of rumors. Hey, they could jump to the Big 12, right? I've heard that.
Yeah.
I've heard, the Big 10's still up in the air. To me, and again, it's not going to happen. You got to, if you're going to start bringing in some of these teams, at least jettison some of the other ones, like, let's be honest. Does Rutgers or Maryland, do they necessarily fit into the Big 10? Would you trade Rutgers or Maryland for Oregon and Washington? I certainly would.
Yeah. If you talk about football, problem is though, like some of those schools, like Maryland usually has a solid basketball program, right? Rutgers, they had a solid basketball year this year. Like I don't know how much stock they put in all of that, but I do know it's a part of the factor. But this is a college football show. Yeah, absolutely. And no knock on Rutgers, and no knock on fucking Maryland as football programs. But yeah, you would take Oregon in a heartbeat, dude. They generate a shit ton up there. I mean, Christ, look at their goddamn brand up there. Nike's right in their back pocket. Like, they bring a ton of money. Washington as well. They're another school, and they're good against. They're pretty good against. With all fronts of sports. So, yeah, I would do that, and I'm with you. I just don't know if I don't know how. Like I said, I don't know. What's your thought? I guess the flip gears. What's your thoughts on Clemson, Florida State, some of those ACC schools?
I like it from a geographical standpoint. It makes sense. I mean, Florida State's on the rise. Clemson's kind of, they had a down year, but you look at how they've done over the last couple of years, like the last decade. I mean, Dabo's had them right. I think to me, you could sort of run into Texas A&M. You know what I mean? You look at Texas A&M, like for example, when they jumped over to the SEC, and they had, what's his name? Johnny Lord. Manziel? No, yeah, it was Johnny Manziel, but I'm trying to think of the coach. It was Kevin.
Before Kevin. Jimbo. Oh my God. I know who you're talking about. Yeah. It's going to kill me.
It starts with an S. It's Kevin Sumlin.
Yep.
I kept wanting to say Summerall, but I knew that wasn't right. I was like, nah, that's definitely not it. This is Kevin Sumlin over there, Texas A&M, and you thought, oh man, that guy's a great coach. Now I think Dabo's the better coach, obviously.
Right.
But you look at what Mike Norvell to this point of his career has done versus Kevin Sumlin, and I think it's not even a question, who the better coach was there. To me, the reason why I'm kind of comparing those two is they jump over to the SEC. They've had some, they've had some okay years there. You go out and you get Jimbo, you pay him all that money.
Yeah.
And, it's just one of those things where you don't really know. You don't really know what's going to happen. I mean, honestly, I think for me, could I see it happening? Yeah. And that would definitely signal the end for the ACC, I think.
Yeah.
Because those are the two biggest brands in your conference. I mean, same way that USC and UCLA are.
What about Miami?
I mean, Yeah, to me,
They were old school Big East when I was a kid. If you don't remember that, they came. You
actually,
remember the old Big East?
yeah, I remember the old
Yeah,
Big
they were over
East.
there with Boston College and Jesus Christ, Pitt and some of those schools, West
Yeah,
Virginia. And that was
West
the
Virginia
old.
was over there too. Yeah, right.
Yeah, this is old
Wasn't
school.
Rutgers was in that for a little bit?
Rutgers. Yep.
Yeah,
Syracuse, all those schools. Yep.
I could see Miami jumping over too.
I mean,
To
they got
me,
to. They not to interrupt you, but I mean, they generate enough money, don't they? I mean, it's Miami. Man, Miami seems to be a pretty popular school. I mean, even their basketball programs, they're not always great, but they're always relevant for the most part. Like, I would think that they'd be one of those two that you want if you were the SEC, for example, if we think they come over, right, with the rest of the group. I mean, Miami's, you say Miami, everybody knows the U, right? Everybody knows the U. So,
you brought up a really great point that I just thought of now, and that is you bring up a good point, and this made me think of this. Imagine this 2 years from now, Miami, Florida State, Clemson, and North Carolina jump over to the SEC. Think about that. You've got three of the biggest schools in the Carolinas. You've got South Carolina, you've got
yep.
North Carolina, and Clemson. You've got that. You can keep those rivalries intact. You've got Florida, Florida State, and Miami back in there. And it to me, it just you can start kind of having these more interesting dynamics with it, right? To me, for the only reason this has to work though is these have to be top tier schools. I mean, I don't want to see Mike Norvell come out and shit the bed this year, and then 2 years from now they regress significantly, and then Florida State ends up being all right. You know what I mean? An all right ACC school that gets kind of drug into the SEC. Same thing with Miami, right? I don't want to see Mario Cristobal go out and not be able to manage talent. I'm not saying he hasn't. I mean, I think he's going to be just fine down there at Miami. But at a certain point, like with Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M, to bring him up again, I mean, he had the #1 recruiting class last year. He's put together some excellent recruiting classes, and they gotta start beating Bama, and they've also got to do a lot better than what they did last year.
No, well, he's eventually, I hate to say this. I mean, this is a different topic for another day, but he could be potentially on a hot seat at some point. That guy has had great recruiting classes. They haven't gotten much out of that. I mean, you know what I mean? Like for what people are expecting. A&M's got a lot of money. Paid him a lot of money. Won a national title at Florida State, if I'm not mistaken, right? With Jameis Winston and those boys down there. He knows how to win. But what he's done at A&M since he's been there, I mean, the recruiting classes, yeah, that's awesome. That's great. But I haven't seen enough, man. Not enough yet. For where the SEC to me is not up. I don't want to say it's up for grabs, but Bama's on a slide, right? LSU has been down since the Joe Burrow days. Georgia's still the fucking team. I get that. But I kind of thought A&M would be moving this way. I really don't see that right now.
Yeah, and it's still young yet. They got to get the quarterback position figured out. I mean, they're really. We talked about this today. We were talking about a little bit of NFL free agency with one another. And one of the things that I kind of said is, you kind of had asked me. I'll just kind of touch on this lightly, but you'd kind of asked me why did the Falcons bow out so early on Lamar Jackson?
Mm-hmm.
And I just think when you look at it, one of the things that I heard was they weren't just a quarterback away from competing. I mean, they really needed so many other pieces that what they were going to have to pay him really wouldn't make sense. But I think if you take that same illustration and you put it towards college football, and you like we're talking about Texas A&M, if you put a top level, and it's not for lack of talent, but you put a kid that's got some experience at this level, in a major conference, be just all right, maybe a little bit, a top 3 or 4 quarterback in any of the major conferences, and you put them on that roster, I got a feeling, man, they could be competing for the Big Ten West.
And I'm not disagreeing with you. I mean, my topic was more on Jimbo Fisher. I mean, this guy I hold a lot of credibility towards because he's getting paid a lot. He's a high name, right? I mean, He doesn't like Saban. You know what I mean? Like, I just want to see more. You know what I mean? As a fan, and I'm not a fan of A&M, but just as a college football fan, like, come on, where are you guys going to get? You're not in the same class yet. You know what I mean? Last year, I thought was a year where they could have potentially competed for that fucking thing, and they just, man, the games I watched, they wasn't very impressive.
Yeah, and I think to speak, so if you're talking about Jimbo Fisher, I think this is the make or break year for him. I mean, we'll do this on another hot take segment, and we'll probably dig more into this. But I mean, hot take, it's one of those situations where if Jimbo doesn't win this year, he's going to be out. I mean, again, we talk about this all the time. It's not a pedestrian take, but it's if he doesn't have a winning season this year, and if it's not like to what Texas A&M is expecting, they're going to be super pissed. They spent a lot of money on that recruiting trail, and they're definitely going to want to see some return on investment. Otherwise, why are we paying you all this money to coach us?
Absolutely.